Welcome back, viewers. You're watching WION World is One. This is WorldDNA, the show that gets you ahead of the rest. I'm Shivan Chandna.
And I'm Jyotsna Kumar. And on the show today, India has set a new normal in dealing with terrorism emanating from Pakistan using Operation Sindoor. That is not yet over, as full authority has been given to military commanders for counteraction in the kinetic domain. The Indian Army has said that 35 to 40 personnel of the Pakistani Army had been killed at the line of control between May 7th and 10th, adding that more than 100 terrorists have been killed in the 9 terror targets in Pakistan which are carried out in Operation Sindoor. We'll get you more on that.
And as of now, residents along the LOC are going back to their homes after several sleepless nights. A sense of calm has also settled in Punjab and Rajasthan after days of cross-border shelling and drone incursions by Pakistan, all while India remains vigilant as ever, as the government has now warned that any future act of terror, no matter the scale, will be seen as an act of war. We'll bring you the latest on that front. Let's start with headlines.
The Directors General of Military Operations of India and Pakistan set to engage today. Sources say no talks expected on other issues such as the Indus Waters Treaty or Kashmir.
Nine terror hubs left more than 100 terrorists killed, including
Over 100 terrorists killed in strikes during Operation Sindoor. These included high-value targets like Yusuf Azhar, Abdul Malik Rauf, Mudassir Ahmad, who were linked to IC-814 hijack and the Pulwama blast.
Indian military says Pakistani army lost 35 to 40 personnel in Indian attacks between May 7th and 10th. India hit Pakistani military installations, 11 air bases and surveillance radar sites in response to Pakistan's intrusion.
All our pilots are back home.
Air Marshal A.K. Bharti confirms all the Indian pilots are back home safe, adds that the objective of the operation was fully achieved.
India lays down new normal for its ties with Pakistan. Government sources tell WION the cost of terror has been increased. Full authority given to military commanders for counteraction in the kinetic domain.
US President Donald Trump hails an announcement by Hamas that it would release American-Israeli hostage Eden Alexander from Gaza. The release comes after direct talks between Hamas and the United States.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he is ready to meet Russian President Vladimir Putin in Istanbul on Thursday. And this after US President Donald Trump called for Ukraine to accept Russia's offer for talks.
Philippines heads to polls in a midterm election today, widely seen as a referendum on the feud between President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and impeached Vice President Sara Duterte.
Wall Street futures are on the rise and the dollar is gaining strength as US-China trade talks lift global market sentiment and ease recession fears.
Barcelona close in on Spanish La Liga title. The Catalan Giants beat rivals Real Madrid 4-3 in a thriller to go 7 points clear with 3 games to go. India has warned Pakistan against violating the understanding on ceasing military actions.
The Indian military also said that Operation Sindoor continues and the Pahalgam terror attack is a big line that was crossed by Pakistan. They added that the operation proved India's defensive and offensive prowess. Revealing details of the operation, Indian military officers underscored that while India struck Pakistan's military infrastructure, Islamabad planned blanket attacks on India's civilian population.
All the attacks were thwarted successfully, proving India's clear military edge over Pakistan. The message is clear for Islamabad. We hit you where we want while protecting our civilians.
I have already detailed the targets. Now, whether it is X numbers or Y numbers that is immaterial. And what damage have we inflicted, you have seen. What are the casualties on the other side? As I said, that is for them to count. As far as we are concerned, from the air defense side, if they had a choice, they would have definitely come in. They are fighters, there are more numbers of UCAVs. It is not that they did not intend to come in. It is only that our robust AD posture prevented them from coming in. So that must be known, and that must be realized by all the audience here.
Operation Sindoor was different in a way that it did not just involve targeting terror hubs. India struck Pakistan military as well. India hit multiple military targets, including air defense radars in Pasrud, Chunian, Arifwala and Sakur. The radar installations in Lahore and Gujranwala, and destroyed airfields in Sargoda, Rahim Yar Khan, Chaklala, Sukur, Bolari and an aircraft hangar at Jacobabad airfield.
However, following these relentless attacks on our air bases, on our forward positions and on our civilian targets, this was time to convey some message to our adversaries. And therefore, a decision was taken to strike where it would hurt. And towards that, in a swift, coordinated, calibrated attack, we struck his air bases, command centers, military infrastructure, air defense systems across the entire Western Front.
Under Operation Sindoor, Indian forces also bombed 3 Pakistani air bases: the Noor Khan Air Base near Chaklala in Rawalpindi and Murid and Rafiki air bases of Shorkot in the Punjab province of Pakistan. Of these 3 air bases, the attack on Noor Khan is said to have sent alarm bells ringing in the Pakistani military establishment. The strategic air base is merely 10 kilometers from capital Islamabad, and it is close to the Strategic Plans Division that oversees Pakistan's nuclear arsenal. In total, Pakistan Army have reported to have lost approximately 35 to 40 personnel on the LOC between the 7th to the 10th of May.
The Pakistan Army has reported to have lost approximately 35 to 40 personnel in artillery and small arms firing on the line of control between the 7th and the 10th of May.
It is clear that India made key strategic gains out of Operation Sindoor. It proved its superiority in the air, land and seas. Now, the Directors General of Military Operations of India and Pakistan are set to engage today.
Now, sources say no talks are expected on other issues like the Indus Waters Treaty or Kashmir. It's solely going to be on the current Operation Sindoor. India and Pakistan agreed to a ceasefire along their border on Saturday. Now, this was an agreement to halt hostilities, or an understanding at best. Pakistan calls it a ceasefire. This is after escalating tensions on both sides. But who are these key players behind this decision? Let's take a closer look at the responsibilities of the Director Generals of Military Operations of India and Pakistan.
Now, the Director General of Military Operations is a senior official in the Army, responsible for overseeing military operations, maintaining operational readiness, and coordinating with defense wings and ministries. The DGMO plays a crucial role in managing sensitive border issues and maintaining communication with counterparts of other nations. DGMOs manage and de-escalate potential conflicts, like in the case of India and Pakistan, since the Pahalgam attack.
According to reports, DGMOs typically operate at the strategic and operational levels within the military hierarchy and report to the Chief of the Army Staff directly. The current DGMO of the Indian Army is Lieutenant General Rajiv Ghai, who assumed the position on the 25th of October 2024. Pakistan DGMO is Major General Kashif Abdullah.
According to India's Foreign Secretary, the DGMOs of India and Pakistan are set to meet after the agreement was reached on Saturday.
Director General of Military Operations of Pakistan called the Director General of Military Operations of India at 15:35 hours earlier this afternoon. It was agreed between them that both sides would stop all firing and military action on land and in the air and sea with effect from 1700 hours Indian Standard Time today. Instructions have been given on both sides to give effect to this understanding. The Directors General of Military Operations will talk again on the 12th of May at 1200 hours. Thank you.
India and Pakistan have agreed to halt all military action on land, air and at sea, but the decision comes without any preconditions.
But while the guns fall silent, the message from New Delhi is loud and clear. The Indus Waters Treaty, signed in 1960 after 9 years of negotiation, still remains on hold. Now, under the treaty, Pakistan gets the western rivers, Indus, Jhelum and Chenab. The treaty gives Pakistan 80% of the Indus River waters, crucial for its agriculture and hydropower, while India gets the eastern rivers Ravi, Beas and Satluj. India is also allowed to use a small share, 20% of water from the Indus system, while Pakistan gets the rest. With India holding back, Pakistan's economy faces severe pressure.
India and Pakistan DGMOs will now hold talks next on 12th of May, that is today at noon. Now, the next steps as well as the progress on the ceasefire, the understanding to halt hostilities is likely to be evaluated in these talks. But as the talks are awaited between the nuclear-armed neighbours, all retaliatory measures announced by India on the 23rd of April, they will remain in place. And the political signal is unmistakable. The treaty is now tied to terror. We're speaking about the Indus Waters Treaty. Until cross-border terror stops, the Indus waters will not flow as before.
All right, we move to West Asia now. Aiden Alexander, the last living American hostage in Gaza, will be released by Hamas.
The release comes after direct talks between Hamas and the United States. And these talks are part of efforts to establish a ceasefire, reopen crossings, and to resume the delivery of aid into the Israeli blockaded territory. Alexander is an Israeli-American soldier who grew up in the United States. He was abducted from his base during Hamas-led attack on the 7th of October 2023 that ignited the war in Gaza. Hamas leader Khalil al-Hayya said that the group was in contact with the US administration over the past few days.
In a statement, al-Hayya said that Hamas was ready to immediately start intensive negotiations to reach a final deal for a long-term truce. The agreement would include the exchange of Palestinian prisoners and hostages in Gaza to end the war, and the handing of the power in Gaza to an independent body of technocrats. The statement, however, did not indicate when the release will happen.
Following the announcement by Hamas, US President Donald Trump took to his Truth Social handle and said that he was happy about the release of Aiden Alexander from Gaza, adding that he hoped all hostages would be released. Now, the Hamas announcement comes shortly before Trump's visit to West Asia this week.
although Trump is not planning to visit Israel. As per the U.S. officials, Trump's special envoy on hostages, Adam Bowler, will travel to Israel with the parents of hostage Eden Alexander ahead of the release.
There was no immediate response from Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's office on this development. It is now reported that Netanyahu was angered by US direct talks with Hamas.
Now, the decision by Hamas was also welcomed by Egypt and Qatar. Both the countries issued a joint statement calling it a gesture of goodwill and an encouraging step to achieve ceasefire in the Gaza Strip.
It further said that the release of prisoners and detainees would ensure the safe and uninterrupted flow of aid to the Gaza Strip.
My Matin, a sick civilian who was abducted from his bed, is being held together with Eden Alexander. Both of them are in the same dark tunnel with no other hostages. If Matin remains alone in that tunnel, Netanyahu is deciding to murder my child. Instead of freeing all the hostages, he is becoming my personal angel of death. My beloved Matin, the Prime Minister has decided to sacrifice you along with other hostages to leave you behind.
On the other hand, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's office has said that as per Israel's policy, the negotiations will take place under fire, with a commitment to achieve all the objectives of the war.
Amidst these developments, the U.S. Special Envoy to West Asia, Steve Witkoff, has denied the presence of any tensions between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Donald Trump. Witkoff said that media was allegedly painting the small disagreements between the leaders as a major issue. He said that Israeli people are a staunch ally of the United States and the Israeli Prime Minister is a good friend of the U.S. President. Well, the world's two largest economies, the United States and China, say they have made substantial progress in trade talks after 2 days of high-level negotiations in Geneva.
With U.S. officials touting a deal to reduce the U.S. trade deficit, while Chinese officials said the sides had reached important consensus and agreed to launch another new economic dialogue forum.
The U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer joined other officials in Switzerland to meet with Chinese team led by Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng. Bessent said that there has been substantial progress in talks. Greer said that the differences between the two sides were not so large as may be thought.
This was, as the Secretary pointed out, a very constructive 2 days. It's important to understand how quickly we were able to come to agreement, which reflects that perhaps the differences were not so large as may be thought. That being said, there was a lot of groundwork that went into these 2 days.
Echoing Bessent and Greer's remarks, Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng said that the meetings achieved substantial progress and described the atmosphere as candid, in-depth, and constructive. He said Beijing and Washington have agreed to create a consultation mechanism during the talks.
The two sides agreed on establishing a consultation mechanism for trade and economic issues, identify the lead persons on each side, and will carry on further consultations relating to trade and economic issues of their respective concerns. The two sides will finalize relevant details as soon as possible and will issue a joint statement that was reached at the meeting on the 12th of May.
The meeting was the first face-to-face interaction between senior U.S. and Chinese economic officials since Trump took office and launched a global tariff blitz. Trump had declared a national emergency over the U.S. fentanyl crisis, imposing a new 20% tariff on Chinese goods in February. He followed with a 34% reciprocal duty on Chinese imports in April, and subsequent rounds pushed the rates into triple digits, bringing nearly $600 billion in two-way trade to a standstill. Well, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has said he is ready to meet his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin this week in Turkey.
This is for talks after US President Donald Trump said that direct talks were needed to determine whether an end to the ongoing conflict is even possible.
Well, Zelensky had earlier said Kiev was open to talks with Russia, but only after a ceasefire was in place.
At a meeting in Kiev on Saturday, European leaders urged Russia to agree to an unconditional 30-day truce with Ukraine. However, Putin's offer of direct talks followed that intervention. Moscow has still not committed to abiding by the 30-day ceasefire proposed by European powers on Saturday, and this is obviously following the 3-day truce that Russia had suggested, which was not accepted by Kiev.
On Sunday, the Russian president proposed direct negotiations to end the conflict in Ukraine, but did not address a 30-day ceasefire proposal drawn up by European allies of Kiev. Speaking at the Kremlin in the early hours of Sunday, Putin proposed direct talks with Ukraine in Istanbul on May 15th, hours after Kiev and the leaders of France, Germany, Britain and Poland had called for an unconditional 30-day ceasefire to start on Monday.
We are determined to have serious negotiations with Ukraine. Their purpose is to eliminate the root causes of the conflict and establish long-term, lasting peace with a historical perspective. We do not exclude that during these negotiations it will be possible to agree on some new truces, a new ceasefire.
Meanwhile, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov has made it clear that arms deliveries from Ukraine's allies would have to stop for a ceasefire to come into place. Peskov also added that Russia will not accept European security forces and peacekeepers inside Ukraine.
Speak about ceasefire. What are we going to do with shipments of weapons coming every day from the United States and from European countries?
So you want those weapons stopped?
We cannot allow NATO's military infrastructure to get that close to our borders.
On the other hand, U.S. President Donald Trump has asked Ukraine to accept Moscow's offer to meet this week in Istanbul to negotiate for a possible end to the ongoing bloodbath, as he calls it.
French President Emmanuel Macron, too, insisted on the necessity for a ceasefire prior to talks between Russian and Ukrainian sides. Now, Kiev's allies pressed Russia to accept a 30-day unconditional ceasefire in Ukraine, threatening Moscow with coordinated sanctions if it did not agree to the demand. The ultimatum came during a joint press conference in Kiev attended by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and the leaders of France, Germany, UK and Poland. But this follows the 3-day ceasefire that Russia proposed only to gauge Ukraine's consideration for a longer ceasefire, which Ukraine rejected.
Starmer, if I could ask you first, you say this is a...
Albanians voted in parliamentary elections on Sunday with Prime Minister Edi Rama seeking an unprecedented fourth term.
The polling stations closed at 7 p.m. local time, but the head of the Election Commission said that the results will be published by Tuesday. Most TV stations decided not to release exit polls, citing procedural or legal issues. One exit poll showed Rama's party getting 51.8% of the vote, with the main opposition getting 38%. The campaign was dominated by promises to join the European Union.
Nearly 3.7 million Albanians exercised their right to vote, including the Albanian diaspora, participating in the ballot for the first time. Of the 2,046 candidates representing 11 political groupings in the fray, the country will elect 140 lawmakers to 4-year terms.
I feel very good. I believe that today the Albanian people will decide to push very strongly forward and to give us all the strength we need to make Albania the next European member state.
While the opposition remains fragmented, the Democratic Party remains the second strongest political force, followed by a range of smaller political parties. Edi Rama's main challenger is Sali Berisha, the leader of the Conservative Democratic Party of Albania, who has long argued that Albania still is not ready for EU membership.
We shall have a second summer day. So once again, my call, vote, vote, vote.
The Albanian parliamentary election is being seen as key test for the country's EU integration. The country is holding the first parliamentary elections since it opened accession negotiations with the European Union in July of 2022.
Today is May 11th, and I've just cast my vote at 7:30 a.m. to exercise my right to vote in the hope of helping to create an even more secure future.
I've come to express my wish, and I think it's also that of the people, to make Albania an even better and more beautiful country, so that our sons, daughters, and grandchildren no longer leave for other countries, but stay here to build Albania.
All right, well, it's time now for a quick short break.
Don't go anywhere. This is World DNA. Jyotsna and I will be back on the other side. More news. Philippines heads to polls in a midterm election today. The polls will decide more than 18,000 posts from seats in the House of Representatives to hotly contested municipal offices.
And also on the other side, Barcelona close in on Spanish La Liga title. The Catalan Giants beat rivals Real Madrid 4-3 in a thriller to go 7 points clear with 3 games to go. We'll get you more on that on the other side. Stay tuned. You're watching WION World is One.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening. As we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
Ready to dive into your daily dose of news?
Bringing you what's trending in the West and all that's setting trends in the East.
And all of this served up with a side of insightful banter.
We don't just bring you the latest stories.
We bring you your talking points for the day.
And while you do that, from the busy streets of New York, I will provide you with deeper insights on the developments through the course of the day in the U.S.
The show that keeps you ahead of the global curve. A conversation you'd want to be a part of. A place where news becomes an engaging exchange.
We bring you stories that impact your present.
This is World DNA. Join the conversation.
Catch me on Token Money Magnet as I demystify tokenization for you, only on WION.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide, because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION, World is One.
To bring the benefits of the Subhash Chandra Show to your educational institution, teachers and students, send an invitation to Juhi Jha at juhi@such.org.in.
Welcome back, viewers. You're watching World DNA with Jyotsna. I'm Shivan. Lots more to discuss. Let's start with the headlines.
Indian Army says no overnight incidents of firing or shelling reported in areas along the international border with Pakistan. This marks the first calm night in these areas since tension flared up after the Pahalgam terror attack.
The Director Generals of Military Operations of India and Pakistan are set to engage today. Sources say no talks are expected on issues such as the Indus Waters Treaty or Kashmir.
Nine terror hubs left more than 100 terrorists killed.
Over 100 terrorists killed in strikes during Operation Sindoor. These include high-value targets like Yusuf Azhar, Abdul Malik Rauf, Mudassir Ahmed, who were linked to IC-814 hijack and Pulwama blast.
Ukrainian President Zelensky says he is ready to meet Russian President Vladimir Putin in Istanbul on Thursday, and this is after US President Donald Trump called for Ukraine to accept Russia's offer for talks.
Philippines heads to polls in a midterm election today, widely seen as a referendum on the feud between President Ferdinand Marcos and impeached Vice President Sara Duterte.
Sources say Trump administration intends to accept a Boeing 747-8 plane as a gift from the Qatari royal family that would then be outfitted to serve as Air Force One. A new commercial 747-8 costs approximately $400 million.
President Trump announces plans to cut U.S. drug prices by up to 80%, tying them to the lowest global rates under a new Most Favored Nation policy set to take effect via executive order on Monday.
Barcelona close in on Spanish La Liga title. The Catalan Giants beat rivals Real Madrid 4-3 in a thriller to go 7 points clear with 3 games to go.
We begin with some news alert coming in. Indian Army says no overnight incidents of firing or shelling has been reported in the areas along the international border with Pakistan.
The Indian Army said that the night remained largely peaceful across Jammu and Kashmir and other areas along the international border. No incidents have been reported, marking the first calm night in over 15 days. Pakistan has been regularly violating the ceasefire at the border, the line of control, since the Pahalgam terror attack. What started as small arms fire had transcended into shelling in the last few days of that ceasefire violation. To discuss this further, I'm now being joined by our special correspondent Idris Lone, who's there in Srinagar. Idris, much needed calm along the LOC. You've been tracking it since day one. It was, I think, over 15 days, and the last few days saw heavy shelling across the border. Give us more on this now calm that is coming in.
Well, absolutely, Shivan. A great welcome step, especially for the people who live close to the line of control, who were living under fear from last at least 18 days. We did see that Pakistan breaking ceasefire just after the Pahalgam attack, and after that continuously, at least for 2 weeks, there was no break. But after the India carried out that targeted attack across the line of control in POK as well as in Pakistan, we saw that Pakistan resorted to massive shelling across the line of control and international border. And after that, there has been no break. And we've seen around 22 people have died in that shelling across line of control and international border, both in North Kashmir as well as in the Jammu division. So a big relief for the people who live very close to the line of control, especially who had to leave their houses. Their properties have been completely destroyed. They'll have to rebuild everything again. But nevertheless, it's a great step that finally peaceful night for everyone, including the security forces, also not only the people who live close to the line of control. The DGMOs of the both countries will be have a meeting today at around 12 o'clock. That's what we've been told, and we are hopeful that the ceasefire agreement continues and there is peace back in all across the valley as well as other parts of the country.
All right, as you said, of course, the Director Generals of Military Operations of India and Pakistan are set to engage today. Of course, we'll be looking forward what happens next. But thank you so much, Idris, for bringing us the latest from the region there. And well, India has set a new normal for Pakistan. This is what the government sources have told WION.
Our colleague Rahisha Sehgal tells you the latest. Take a look.
Now, India has set a new normal for Pakistan. This is what government sources have told WION. Let us now take you through what the new normal is between India and Pakistan. What are the red lines that India has now drawn? Number one, the cost of terror has been increased. Apart from that, Pahalgam terror attack was a big line crossed and there has to be a cost. That's the statement from New Delhi. They fire, we fire, they stop, we stop. That's what's the statement from New Delhi, which comes under the new normal between India and Pakistan. Then, full authority to army commanders for counteraction in the kinetic domain. Let's also now tell you what is India's big message to Pakistan. Number one, we will hit you in your heartland. That's what India's message is for Islamabad. Apart from that, we haven't lost sight of anyone involved in terror against India. Then, talks only between DGMOs and not NSAs between New Delhi and Islamabad. And talks only on two issues between India and Pakistan. Number one, handling over Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. And number two is, of course, terrorists responsible for terror attacks against India. Let's also now tell you what's India's message to the world. If Pakistan does anything, it will get a response more devastating than anything else. And there should be no doubt we will hit terror targets in Pakistan. Apart from that, this is a very important message that India has sent to the world, and it's you cannot equate victims and perpetrators of terror. Even-handedness won't be tolerated. And India to present evidence to 1267 Sanctions Committee, that's against Pakistan as well. Military-wise, what are all India's objectives achieved under Operation Sindoor? How India has emerged victorious. Military-wise, Bhavalpur, Muridke, Muzaffarabad. Now, all these three terror hubs, they were eliminated in 30 minutes. That's what the Indian Army has told us. When we talk about the political victory that India has achieved over Pakistan, the Indus Waters Treaty and abeyance till terror stops. And the psychological victory that India has gained will strike deep in Pakistan, promise filled. So India has clearly said that India will strike deep inside Pakistan, and that was proven with Operation Sindoor.
We spoke with Indian Army veteran and director Gyan Chakra think tank Major General Neeraj Bali to get his insights on Pakistan giving safe haven to terror groups and India's retaliatory precision strikes against Pakistan. Here's a snippet. Take a look.
We can never assume that any deterrence is going to be enough when you're dealing with an enemy which doesn't believe in rational behavior, as was on display even last evening after the ceasefire violation came into place. But it is for us to do clear and unmistakable messaging And I think today's comprehensive briefing did exactly that, where it was clearly laid out that if any further acts of violence will be met with a response which will have consequences. In fact, General Ghai used the words, the response will be fierce and punitive. So I think we have very clearly laid out the new norms of interaction between the two countries. There has been far too many terrorist attacks on our country, and which we have sometimes retaliated against and sometimes we haven't. But now we have laid down a clear red line that should there be another terrorist attack, another violation of that kind, it is going to be considered an act of war. So I think this is a big departure from what we have done all these years.
We also spoke with Defense and Strategic Affairs expert retired Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni on India talking tough to Pakistan on ceasefire breach. Listen into what he said.
Musharraf has claimed it and he stated openly that Pakistan has been training, and that may be to be a co-partner with the United States of America. He himself said that, well, they have mercenaries, they have trained Taliban, and that they have even trained Mujahideens. So all these, he says, after the Soviet Union were pushed back by the Americans, and there were more than thousands and thousands and thousands of them, he said, what do we do with them? Imran Khan has admitted that they had over 20,000 and much more of these terrorists in Pakistan. So I think the only way that Pakistan alone can rein these terrorists, because Pakistan is the one which is, the perpetrators of all of it. And hence, Pakistan Army, the very fact that the Secretary of State, Rubio, had to speak to Munir was indicator that the only control is with the Pakistan Chief of the Army Staff. There is no doubt about that. And also, after the terrorists were killed, the fact that each one of them were wrapped in the national flag of Pakistan, given almost a state funeral, is indicative the hand-in-glove policy of the terrorists and the Pakistan Army. In fact, they are not, the whole lot of them are terrorists. And all these, whether we call them Lashkar-e-Taiba, Hizbul Mujahideen, Jaish-e-Mohammed, the Resistance Front, Kashmir Tigers, and none but the fronts of the Pakistan Army. And Pakistan, otherwise why else would generals and everyone stand for funeral? Why else would Masood Azhar say, yeah, I wish I had died along with my family?
The Philippines is voting in a crucial midterm election. The polls are being seen as a referendum on the explosive feud between Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and impeached Vice President Sara Duterte.
Now the race will decide more than 18,000 posts from seats in the House of Representatives to hotly contested municipal offices. However, it is the battle for the Senate that carries potentially major implications for 2028's presidential election.
The 12 senators chosen today will form half the jury in an impeachment trial for Duterte. The trial, scheduled for later this year, could see her permanently barred from public office. Sara Duterte will need 9 votes in the 24-seat Senate to preserve any hope of a future presidential run.
Duterte's feud with former ally Marcos exploded in February when she was impeached by the House for alleged high crimes, including corruption and an assassination plot against the president.
Nearly a month later, her father, former President Rodrigo Duterte, was arrested and flown to the International Criminal Court to face a charge of crimes against humanity over his deadly anti-drugs campaign. Despite his detention at The Hague, the elder Duterte remains on the ballot in his family's southern stronghold of Davao City, where he is seeking to retake his former job as mayor.
Now, the Philippine Army reported that a day before the election, at least 2 people were killed in a clash between supporters of rival political camps in southern Mindanao, Island's autonomous Muslim region.
The Philippines has a history of violent elections, especially in the restive south, where armed clashes between groups of political rivals are common.
In the week ahead, analysts will look at tariffs first. Markets welcomed the UK-US deal last week, presumably because it increases the chances of a wider de-escalation.
However, the fact that the UK failed to negotiate the 10% baseline tariff says a lot. Other countries could struggle to gain similar exemptions on metals and cars. But the reason, analysts say, a British deal was low-hanging fruit, given the US has a trade surplus in goods. Even if lots of other countries do gain these exemptions, and the Trump administration has hinted some might, it doesn't change the big picture.
Now, ING estimates the US is now charging a near average tariff of 23% across everything it imports. And that's why the talks between the US and China in Geneva this weekend matter so much. Maybe it's too late already. The tariff hit is here, judging by the sharp drop in trade volumes at major US ports.
US inflation and retail sales are expected to show some hit from tariffs. The real question is, could inflation go above 5%? It's certainly possible if the supply chain damage is particularly severe. For household spending, the omens aren't good. Confidence is down and should reflect it in retail sales numbers this week. Still, in markets, the big Wall Street comeback last week is hurting a slew of bear market bets. From Apple to GM, many American firms have warned that tariffs and retaliatory levies will cost tens of billions of dollars.
The corporate America is bracing for significant damages from Trump's trade war, and that's before most affected goods have even landed. In this next report, we dive into the impact of Trump's multi-front trade wars, even as the U.S. is looking to make trade deals. Take a look.
US companies, including Apple, General Motors and Nvidia, have warned of a deep hit to earnings from Trump's tariff wars, with some already disclosing financial projections. Many companies have yet to provide guidance, but the preemptive warnings from those that have may vastly underestimate the overall hit to bottom lines. Some industries are likely to be impacted later in the year. Among US companies that have disclosed financial projections so far, GM sees a $5 billion hit this year. Apple expects $900 million in higher costs in the current quarter. Nvidia is taking a $5.5 billion charge to account for new export controls. Ford, AMD and P&G announced a hit of about $1.5 billion. Analysts say that despite those projections already running into billions, firms may have significantly understated the total impact on profits. There is a lack of direction from many businesses. Some are just waiting to see what happens. Some have hinted at the pain ahead by increasing their expenditure estimates, lowering their full-year predictions, or warning that price increases will reduce customer demand. Meta Platforms increased its capital expenditure forecast for the year by as much as $7 billion. The company attributed the adjustment in part to higher than expected equipment expenses sourced internationally. The word uncertainty has become a go-to descriptor for many executives during the quarterly financial result calls. The U word has cropped up more than 9,000 times so far in corporate calls this season. That is more than when it last peaked at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic and the highest mentions recorded in Bloomberg data. Dozens of companies, including Nvidia, Oracle, Home Depot, and Walmart, have yet to report their latest earnings and answer analyst questions about the blow from tariffs. Some industries, such as online advertising, will likely be impacted later in the year. For now, investors and businesses globally will focus on the US-UK trade deal and China talks this weekend. Business Bureau, WION World is One.
Barcelona took a huge step towards securing Spanish La Liga title. The Catalan Giants rallied to beat rivals Real Madrid in a 7-goal thriller.
Hansi Flick's side has now opened a 7-point lead with just 3 games remaining, and this was virtually Madrid's last chance to halt Barcelona's title charge. They got off to the perfect start with Kylian Mbappe lighting lighting up the stadium in the first 15 minutes itself. The 2018 World Cup winner opened the scoring in the 5th minute by converting a penalty. Mbappe doubled the lead 10 minutes later when he latched on to a through ball by Vinicius Jr. and fired it past the keeper. Barcelona, still reeling from their Champions League semi-final defeat to Inter Milan on Tuesday, looked lethargic, but then they flipped a switch. Eric Garcia got the hosts on the scoreboard, heading home from a corner in the 19th minute to begin the comeback. Lamine Yamal, who had a quiet opening half hour, announced himself by curling in the equalizer in the 32nd minute.
And 2 minutes later, Barcelona took the lead. Madrid lost possession after Mbappe and Lucas Vazquez collided. Rafinha took advantage and unleashed a brilliant effort to make it 3-2. But on the candidate, after missing a sitter, found redemption by scoring his second of the night just before the break. Madrid, who had gone 2 goals up in the first 15 minutes,